Okay, so I am Darcy Hammond. I am the program coordinator for the Northern Rockies Fire Science Network, and we are really excited today to be offering this webinar in collaboration with the Rocky Mountain Research Station Missoula Fire Science Lab. Ooh, that was too many words all in a row. Um, and we're also working with several of the other Joint Fire Science Program Fire Science Exchange Network regions to offer this fantastic webinar today. Let me drop a couple of links in the chat there. If you're from the Northern Rockies region, please make sure you're signed up for our newsletter. If you're not from our region, you could still sign up for our newsletter, but you can also go to the JFSP page and find your local region and sign up for theirs too. I am going to let Faith Ann and Llewellyn introduce themselves. So take it away. It's all yours.
Hi, everybody. This is Faith Ann Heinch. I am a physical scientist at the Missoula Fire Sciences Lab, and I've been working with Behave since I started with the lab back in 2009. And Llewellyn and I are co-developing 7, and we've been working on it for about 3 years at this point, I think. And we're happy to announce that it's available for use. And the presentation, the way it's going to work is I'll be giving the PowerPoint talk, and then Llewellyn's going to do the demonstrations. Other work that I do along this line is I also work in both fire danger and fire behavior in general, and lead a lot of training courses and training development along those as well, and run the help desk or the tier 2 help desk. So if you contact the main help desk, then they usually contact me with questions about both pieces of software, so you may hear from me anyway. I'm going to let Llewellyn introduce herself when she starts the demonstrations, just so you don't forget who she is, because she is very important to this project. And I'm going to cut my video off to save bandwidth and see if we can get this presentation going. Okay, can everybody see my slides?
Yeah, you should be good to go.
Okay, excellent. So in this outline, we're going to look at the differences between BehavePlus version 6 and Behave7. I did not update this from Tuesday. We're going to look at the surface module. We're going to look at surface and crown, but we're going to spend a little bit more time on surface contain and then surface mortality. We've basically taken 6, we've broken it apart, cut it up into little pieces, and then put it back together in an entirely new way. So it is completely different than 6, and hopefully we'll be able to explain why, but also what we've done to make it easier for the user, we hope. Also include a few enhancements that'll be included or planned for the next few releases in the next year or so. Then we'll follow up with a demo, and again, this presentation is most useful for burn bosses and then RX300 cadres. And one of the questions we had last time, or one of the complaints, is why didn't we stay with BehavePlus 7 instead of going back to Behave? And we thought about it long and hard. We did ask people for another name, and I have to admit we didn't get any answers that we could really use. So we decided to go back to Behave, and one of the reasons for that was to split the difference between 6 and 7 is so great. We wanted to really provide a split between the two. So in BehavePlus version 6, if you haven't seen it in a while, we have the Monty Dolac paintings. Those will be going away in 7 because we went with a whole new interface, and they wouldn't work in there. This is the sheet that you saw, the worksheet that you were able to work with. The module selections were hidden, and the options within those were hidden even deeper. And then you ended up with tables and graphs, similar to what we do today. We'll have tables and graphs and everything available. And the thing I will probably miss the least are the blue navigation arrows that we had to use to get from page to page in 6. Um, BehavePlus version 6 they started developing it in 1998 and released it in 2002. So technology has taken a big leap since then, and we wanted to take advantage of that and look at this in a brand new way. So when we were looking at creating Behave7, we looked at navigation first. We wanted to make sure that outputs are requested first. As we've been training students for the last few years, you need to know what your question is. And if you have a question, what outputs do you need to answer it? And so we wanted to make sure that students, at least, were encouraged to select outputs first, and now you have no choice. We retained the ability to show only the required inputs. So once you select your outputs, Behave will ask for the inputs that you need. We simplified choices for analysis. In Behave 6, we had everything as a separate module. So we had surface, crown, size, spot, scorch, mortality, and probability of ignition. And we've taken that and we've reduced it down to 4 options. And that will hopefully prevent users from making some of the common errors that we see that lead to inconsistencies in the results. As such, as I mentioned before, Behave7 has been completely rewritten. We have a new interface. We, at the Fire Lab, Bill Chatham, who worked here for a number of years, took the code from 6 and took it out of the interface. They were combined. And he got the scientific code into base units of the small code blocks that we have now that are easier than for other people to use in their software as well. And we got expert assistance with the UI UX from our collaborator. And Andrea, walked us through this in a very sometimes painful process because we had so many decisions to make. But with her guidance, we came up with, I think, what is an intuitive piece of software. The other thing we were looking for when doing this was we wanted consistency in the code. The way Behave calculated some of the fire behavior elements was slightly different than in FlamMap, which would give you different answers between the two. In order to prevent that from happening in the future, we actually took the code from FlamMap 6.2 and used that fire behavior code in Behave7. The probability of mortality, Behave was last updated in 2018. For a variety of reasons, I couldn't update it after that. So we went and got the most recent code from the first order fire effects model, or FOFM. And so that has also been included. And then finally, for containment, Mark Finney's group had been working on the wildland fire investment planning system, and they had updated the containment algorithm for that system. We took that code, even though that's not something we use in the field, we took that code, brought it into Behave to make sure we had the most current software that we could get. In this way, some of your answers between Behave 6 and 7 will be different, but Behave 7 should be closer, if not exactly equal to, the FlamMap and FOFM code. The next thing we wanted to do is look at the workflows. We thought about people and how they use this, and we identified several workflows by audience. The first one, and the one that's currently available, is for students and mostly intermittent users or people who are switching from one to the other, and that's the guided workflow. This workflow is going to take you step by step through the process, allow you to select everything, puts things together in a way you can really see what's happening under the hood when you look at this. The next one we're going to release, hopefully within the next month or two, is the standard workflow. This will look a lot more like BehavePlus version 6 in that all the outputs will be on one page, and then all the inputs that you enter will be on the second page. And again, you'll have to enter your outputs first before entering your inputs. The final one is largely for researchers. We're also calling it the kitchen sink, and this will allow you to import batch files of calculations and then produce outputs in a CSV file. We actually have part of that developed. Everyone can download their outputs in a comma delimited CSV file. So that part's developed. The other part will come later. We really want to think about what all variables need to be included for that. Some other updates that we've seen along the way, or we've done along the way. We were limited to multiple values for 2 variables. So you could vary, say, 1 hour fuel and wind speed, but that was it. We can now enter multiple values for three variables instead. So, say 1 hour fuel moisture, wind speed, and then elapsed time if you wanted to look at fire growth across time, for example. In this case, all the graphs will be produced. The tables will not be produced for three variables, but again, all the data can be exported as a CSV file and you can create the tables you need in that way. But you will get the graphs that you want to see for that. Files can now be stored anywhere on your computer. You no longer have to remember everything's in C, BehavePlus, and then Behave6, and then further down in the default database file. So you can store them anywhere. You can store them in your workspace. You can store them on an external drive. You can store them in your C drive, in your documents, anywhere you want to. So you just have to remember where they are. That's the key to these. And then finally, we've taken some lessons learned from the WIFDIS group and the IFTDIS group, and we've added notes so that people, especially students, get used to making notes early in the system. And so you can add notes at any page in the input outputs or the inputs to this, and as well as in the results themselves. Some other updates which may I'll talk about the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in just a minute, Brett. It's not only approved software, we actually are going to be working with all of the agencies to get it approved. It runs on Java, but it also runs on Amazon Corretto. And I know that BLM uses Corretto, and they're able to use Behave7. So if that's an option for you, then we can get it to work with that. But once we get the release finalized, then we'll be contacting all the DOI agencies too and see if we can help you guys with that along the way. So I definitely appreciate the question about that. So one of the biggest updates for us, I think, to really think about was looking at crown fire type and calculations by crown fire. So in BehavePlus 6, if we were looking at crown fire, the first thing we did was we had what we called conditional crown. It's also known as independent crown. The fire that's actually burning in the area is a surface fire. The only way it would become a crown fire is if active crown fire burned in from elsewhere. So really the fire behavior seen at the site at the moment is surface. So we changed it to surface. Independent crown is very difficult to model and also very rare. So we didn't want to confuse people with that when in fact what you see on the ground before that happens is generally a surface fire. And then in that case, if you have a surface fire, you would use the surface rate of spread and the surface fire flame length. No issues there. In a active crown fire situation, you would use regardless of whether you were using Rothermel or Finney, then you would need to use the active crown fire rate of spread and flame length. And then the tricky one was torching or passive crown fire. And in that case, using Rothermel, you would have to remember that your rate of spread comes from the surface fire and your crown flame length comes from the active crown fire. So that was one of the things that was always tricky. And then if you look at the Scott and Reinhardt version, then you would have to look at the passive crown fire rate of spread and flame length, and you'd have to remember to turn those on if you wanted to see that. So there were some issues there. It was causing a lot of confusion. It was confusing for us to explain. It was more confusing for users to use. So that was one of the first things we wanted to change, and that is no longer the case. We now have everything will update according to the type that it is. So in this case, I am using several fuel models and several options for canopy bulk density. And so the surface fire, if it's identified as surface fire, it will be listed as the surface fire outputs in the tables and graphed with the surface fire values in the results. So that's the first thing that we have. If you have torching, we are going to end up with having the torching values that will be viewed and then graphed. So don't have to remember which one am I using. Am I using Rothermel? Or now it's Finney. We've adopted the Finney model to replace Rothermel. Very similar, some slight differences there. And then Scott and Reinhardt, doesn't matter which one you use, it's going to give you the answer for torching fire. And then if you have active crown, we're looking at crowning. You will see the values for active crown fire. One of the requests we got on Tuesday, and we're already looking into that, is actually color coding the squares in some way inside the tables so that you will know at an instant whether you have a surface torching or crown fire using the color scheme from Flam Map, which would be green, yellow, red. And so we've already started talking to the developers about that and what that would look like. So this is Behave7. You do not need the internet to run it. When you open Behave7, and Lowen will demonstrate that, it opens a local window. So it's Java based. Again, it runs on multiple versions of Java. Oracle's Java or Amazon Corretto have both been tested. There's others out there that we haven't tested yet. It opens a browser window. We're taking advantage of the calculation power of your browser window. It does not touch the internet. It's completely independent. We definitely wanted to make sure we had something that did not connect to the internet because that was one of the primary concerns we had with users being able to access it whenever they needed to. We have a new logo to look at, and that logo not only reminds you that you're with Behave7, it gives you the current version number that we're working with, so you can always ensure you're working with the latest version. And if you click on the logo, it will take you back to this screen and erase everything that you've done. The modules, we have 4 modules now, and all of them contain different items. I'll talk about them in a bit, but for example, in surface, we've included the surface fire behavior, size, spot, probability of ignition, and that will continue forward. So each one of these modules is combining a number of things that were related to those modules. So we have surface, crown, contain, and mortality. That's all we have. And then we have the calculators. We're changing, it's not tools anymore, they're called calculators because essentially they're calculating something for you. And so we have the standard calculators in there. We also have a calculation of vapor pressure deficit, and we will be bringing in a version of the safety of the safe distance or the separation for size. Sorry, no. For safety zones. The safety zone calculation will be coming in as well as soon as we get the code finalized and make sure we've got it right with Dan Jimenez. So that will be coming in. The settings for now are primarily looking at changing your units from English to metric or back again, and then also setting the number of decimal places if you want something other than what the default is. In the working area, we have 2 options right now. We have the guided workflow, which is what you'll see today. And then if you have an existing file, you can open or import that file. We could not figure out a way to open Behave6 files in Behave7. We tried really hard, but it was becoming really onerous and it was taking away some developer time that we needed to get other things done. So we made the decision, as painful as it is, to only support Behave7 files at this time. And you'll be able to, once you create them, save them on your computer, share them with people just like you could with Behave6, and they will be able to open them. The help system, we still maintain a robust help system. It's still in progress, so some things may not be exactly the way you want to see them. And if you have comments on that, please let us know. And then one of the other things, because this is in a browser window, we're able to resize things. As with the old Behave, you can hide the help. And that would indeed allow you, here we go. If you close the help, then this main working area window will extend over the help. If you use the arrow inside the working area, it will take over the whole window and close the modules and calculators as well. And there will be a button there that you can use to open those up. So it's completely flexible in that regard. And then finally, we've got three options here. We have the home button is similar to the Behave7 button in that it will bring you back to the main page. The save button saves your run, and the print button will print your run results out. We have the run now. It creates a PDF, and you can print that or save it to your computer of all of your inputs, graphs, and tables. The other thing that we are working to create in the future is something that you can attach to your burn plan that would include all of the documentation that you want. And this is where some of those notes inside the software is going to be really helpful for you as you move forward. Currently, we have five settings that we have that you can choose for your run. We have surface only, and surface and crown, which combines both what was in surface with similar elements from crown. Surface and mortality go together, and you can look at that. Surface and contain can be run together so that you can use your surface outputs to drive containment. And we currently also are developing mortality only, which will have all of the mortality related to FOFM because we're bringing large parts of FOFM into Behave. We're not exactly sure how much at this point. Ultimately, our intent may be to move all of FOFM into Behave, but we haven't finalized those decisions yet. So for now, this one doesn't work, but the other four are available for use. Today, Luwen will show you a demonstration using surface and crown, surface and mortality, and surface and contain. So all the modules that are currently available. If you look at surface here, this is surface. Immediately you can show any notes that you've written. If you show the notes, you can add a note to what you're looking at. The modules, they don't do anything. They just show you what modules are currently included in the run. So you see it at the top of the screen, but you also see it on the side as you move through things. The tabs on the upper right-hand side will show you whether you're in the outputs or the inputs. They'll highlight and switch back and forth. And we've divided the outputs up in a different way so that we have fire behavior, which includes things like the rate of spread, the direction, and the probability of ignition, and then the size of the fire, spotting distance from the fire, and then wind and fuel. The wind and fuel allows you to calculate the mid-flame wind speed and also look at fuel loadings when you're using those dynamic fuel models. So you'll be able to see some of that information by checking on that. If we look, then we have looking at the back and the next arrows. Those will take you back and forth in the run. You can also click on any of the tabs to go back and forth, whichever one works best for you. And then once we get to the inputs, now the inputs tab will highlight. And we've also split these up in a slightly different way. We start with the fuel model that you select, the fuel moisture, wind and slope information, and then because I had a size option selected in the outputs, it put size in here. I had not requested spotting, so the spotting tab will not appear. If we look at crown, then we see the same type of thing. This wind and fuel that we have we have surface and crown. The modules of surface and crown are showing. We have our outputs in there. Surface is marked in green colors and crown is marked in orange. So we're trying to give a number of different clues that something has changed in looking at these things. Wind and fuel, just to make things a little more logical, is going to move to the end. So you'll start with fire behavior, fire type, size, and spot. And then if you're interested in mid-flame wind speed or the fuel loads, you'll be able to get those as well. But since we don't think they're going to be used very often, we decided to move those to the end. Once you select that, then you get your inputs. Everything works similar, the same, except now because we're in crown, we have a few things that are different. We've got the crown fire method. Again, we updated from Rothermill to Finney to better match Flam Map. And we need foliar moisture and canopy fuel characteristics for the canopy there. Looking at surface and mortality, there are no mortality outputs to select. We've automatically selected those for you. So those will be generated for you. You don't have to select them. If you want any of these surface outputs in addition to that mortality, then you will be able to see and add those. For the inputs, the surface is green. Sorry, mortality will be peach when we get to that point. And so these are the mortality outputs that are provided, the probability of mortality, the scorch height, and the crown length and crown volume scorched. Those are all automatic outputs that you'll get in once you calculate your run. One of the biggest things that we've done in terms of species in mortality is we've gone to calling them tree characteristics to remind you that these are trees. We took the entire list of species from FOFM and put it in here. We also had a colleague from FIA identify all the species within each geographic area. So each GAC, we had him divide them up into the species. Any species that had 2 or more points was included in the list. And so we've divided it up by Alaska, California, Eastern area, all the way through the Southern area and the Southwest. So each GAC has the list of species that are seen there. And since the mortality models have not changed in a long time, remember that most species are still modeled as spruce or not spruce. The thing that changes is the bark thickness equation and the DBH that you use with that. So those are the things that change. The general model itself doesn't change. We've taken in all of the ones that are available, including the ones developed here at the Fire Lab and the longleaf pine model, and the ones that have been developed for the Southeast will be included soon. And other than that, everything else is going to be a spruce or not spruce because there are no equations out there that we're aware of. As equations are developed, we will bring them in, of course. Once you get to contain, again, we have the surface and contain. The contain is going to be, I'm calling it pale red or light red as opposed to pink. But surface is still green. The contain suppression components are light red. In this, we're asking for tactic, line construction elapsed time, and then for resources in BehavePlus version 6, very complicated. What we've done is we actually have you add a resource by clicking on the button at the bottom, and each resource will have a name, some resource arrival time, a line production rate, and a duration, and you simply add resources as you know what time, how many of resources you have available to you. On the other hand, there are benefits to not assuming that you have resources available and simply finding out what resource line production rate you need under the given conditions that you are putting into the model. So we're developing, it's not quite ready yet, we're developing a new system in which we will look at the contained status and we'll find the line production rate at which it was contained. And in that case, what we're going to do is we're going to give you the actual minimum production rate for containment. Notice it was 50 in our table, but in actuality, it occurred at 48 chains per hour. We wanted to give you the exact number because if it's 45 as opposed to 49, you may make different decisions. We're going to give you in a summary table the minimum time to containment, assuming you have this production rate on site. And the minimum amount of fire line constructed will also be presented with the minimum contained area and the fire area at the start of containment. So once the resources start production, it's 1.6 acres, and by the end of that, it would be 66 acres when contained. This allows you to look and say, okay, I need 50 chains per hour of line production if this thing gets out. Therefore, let me figure out what resources I have and what combination that can give me that, as opposed to saying, well, I have these resources, I hope they're enough. Now you know a better idea of what you need. So that is there. Some of the future enhancements that we have, the jar package, we'll talk a lot about the jar package. Again, it's Java based. It does run in several versions of Java. I will also say, since I forgot at the beginning, it now runs in Windows on a Mac operating system and in Linux. So it does finally run in more than just one system. It does use you do have to have some version of Java on your computer. Lowen will demonstrate how you open the file. The file itself is not installed on your computer. You copy it to your computer, and then you would double click on it to open it. That's all you need to do. There's no installation program, none of that. And everything in it, we're working towards an updated package where Java, the Java version, and Chromium will all be combined within the jar package. I can tell you for the Forest Service, it's already been certified and approved for software, so it's in the Carbon Black list to go onto your computer. And hopefully by incorporating all of that together, we can make it easier for everyone to install it. However, I will say, if you have a personal computer and you're trying to run it, make sure you have Java on your computer first. If you don't have Java, some version of Java, if you don't have it, it won't work. So for Java, it's called Java. For Amazon Credo, it's called OpenJDK. So that you can use whichever one is approved by your agency or which one you prefer on your own computer. Again, we will work with the agencies to get this running on all federal and some state computers. We're also developing that standard workflow and eventually the research or kitchen sink batch runs. We're looking at the safe separation distance safety zone calculator. That's the name I couldn't remember earlier. And somehow relative humidity got left off the list, so we'll add that back in. We have not yet brought in custom fuel models and custom moisture scenarios. Those will be out in the next release, I believe. After that, we'll bring back in those species-specific fuel models, the chaparral, the palmetto gallberry, and the western aspen. For those of you who work in mortality with western aspen, when we do that, the western aspen mortality will actually be in the mortality code, not in the surface code, which made things extremely confusing. So we'll have that in there. And then we're working with Jason Forthofer here at the lab to bring in a new layered canopy wind adjustment factor calculation. And so more on that later as it is entered into the program. With that, I need to thank a lot of people. First, all of the burn bosses and fire analysts who have helped us develop the vision and tested Behave in the past. Those of you who have are going to be helping us in the future, we really appreciate this. Ultimately, this software is for you, not for us. And so we want to make it the most useful we can for you. Forest Service Research and Development has provided the bulk of the funding to this point for this software, and I cannot thank them enough for this. At the Rocky Mountain Research Station, Lisa Bryant and Larry Wiegand were super helpful in bringing both Lisa for publicity and Larry for finding some of the funding and helping us work with this Forest Service CIO. In Fire, Fuel, and Smoke Sciences, Sarah Brown, the program manager, and Thomas DeZamba, the Deputy Program Manager, fully supportive the entire time. Research scientists Mark Finney, Sharon Hood, Matt Jolly, Natalie Wagenbrenner, Jason Forthofer, super helpful in either bringing code in, helping us interpret code from other software, or helping us get new ideas on how to develop things. Signe Larafalum, Chuck McHugh, and Bill Chatham have been really helpful in developing the code, in making sure that we're getting our publicity out the way we should, and then helping us interpret again how some of these things work. Chuck, especially with FlamMap, and then Bill Chatham, who took BehavePlus 6 apart and provided all of the tiny little code blocks for us, which was a multi-year project. Finally, in the Fire Modeling Institute, our supervisor, Greg Dillon, who's the director of the Institute, and Duncan Lutz, who manages the FOFM program, extremely helpful and supportive throughout this entire thing. And in the CIO, I would really like to thank Mike Gallagher, Bruce Boydston, and John Klein. All of them have now left the CIO, but while they were there, they were super, super helpful in helping us get this through, including John Klein, who did approve the version, I think on one of his last days in the office. So I really thank them for that. And then Fire Forest Service, Fire, and Aviation Management, the IT, FAM IT. Teddy Lamore in particular has helped us with the funding for BehavePlus 6 throughout the years and provided a lot of advice on how to potentially continue to fund this project into the future. And she's been working with us on this since forever, and I really appreciate that from her. The Spatial Informatics Group is the group that we're working with on this, also known as SIG. Dave Saw is one of the owners of the SIG, and he is extremely supportive in getting Behave out. He sees the importance of it and really wants it to happen. Teal Dimitri was for a while our project manager, and now she's working overseeing all of the person development over there. Thomas DeVera took those original code blocks and divided them up into sections for surface, crown, etc. Andrea Rashka is the UI UX person. She introduced us to a whole new world of witchcraft and ways that we could improve the interface so that we could give you something easier to use. Jordan Combs and Shauna Hobbs have been our project managers. RJ Shepard and Kenny Chung are the programmers that work on this. And then finally, I want to thank Brett Shields, who introduced us to Antonio Petreo, because we have brought in the 18 Portuguese fuel models. The Portuguese are probably the second most common users of Behave. And we wanted to include their fuel models for Mediterranean systems in Behave, not only to help them, but also because we think they may be useful here in the United States, and it's easier to test if they're already in the system. Antonio translated that Portuguese into English for us so that we could tell you, so that you would know what you're working on with that. Finally, University of Idaho, we have Frames website, which Diana Olson and Kelly Lotz run. They're helping us maintain that site and giving us ideas on how to present things there. And the Fire Science Exchange networks have always been extremely supportive of everything that we've done related to Behave and training, and especially in the Northern Rockies Fire Science Network, Darcy Hammond and Ella Hall for supporting us developing these webinars along the way. Finally, if you have any feedback and initial bug reports, don't contact the help desk. If you contact the help desk, they're going to send it to us. So you can contact them, they will send it to us, or you can contact us directly, at least as we're starting to roll this out. And here are our email addresses. Again, bugs, there are bugs now. There will be bugs for the near future. We're squashing them as fast as we can. And again, the software's for you. Any feedback that you can give us to improve that for others, I really, really appreciate that. And that is all that I have here. So I am going to turn it over to Luwen with the demo. So give us just a moment to switch that.
Hi, folks. It's great to see a lot of folks joining us today. My name's Luwen Hollingsworth. I am a fire behavior specialist here at the Fire Lab. And sorry, I have to kill teams. I've been helping for quite a few years with RX 300 in 2 geographic areas, the burn plan writing workshops that started mostly last year. So I think I've helped with 4 or 5 of those. And then also S490 that of course is required for RxB1. Okay, we have 2 slides left in the PowerPoint. Okay, does that look okay? Because it did the weird presenter view before.
Yep, that looks good now.
Excellent. Okay, so I did want to base, I'm going to kill my camera just to save bandwidth. Oh, maybe I don't know how now that I'm sharing. We'll just see how it goes. I did want to base the demos on a burn unit because that's going to make the most sense to you guys. So I'm using a unit that we used a number of years ago here in the Northern Rockies in RX 300. So this is just outside Missoula. Here is the Bitterroot River. Right here in red is the unit. You can see there's some structures quite close here on the north and then across the river. And then this white is private land. So this unit butts up directly to private land. Here's just some information from the silvicultural prescription. And if I am going to pick on silviculturists for a minute, I haven't looked at this prescription in a couple of years. But when we look at this this underburn, I I think you should push back if your silviculturist is actually giving you a flame length range in the prescription. That is certainly up to you guys as burn bosses to figure all that out. But a little bit about this unit. It was lop and scatter, specifically to get rid of the baby Doug fir, less than 5 inches DBH. And that slash was left on site and then underburned. So we are approaching this from that point of view of it has been slashed, but we are now ready to light the match. Okay, let me pull up the right window. That's not the right window. There we go. So a little bit about where you put the jar file once you once you grab it from the frame site. So you really can put it anywhere. I mean, I would probably suggest for most of you to put it right on your desktop because I work a little bit differently and I'm going to have every version. I am using my C workspace, which is where I have some other software. So I'm going to go ahead and fire it up from here. So I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to open this open with. And you'll notice right away that I can open it with either Java or this is the Amazon Corretto option. These are both available in the Forest Service Software Center. We did do some initial testing with BLM, and I'm hoping this holds true with the rest of DOI. Java is not available for, at least for BLM. So we did work with the BLM on testing it with Corretto and it works just fine. So I'll go ahead and I can open it on either one, but I'll go ahead and open it with Java. Okay. So I know right away that it's working. It's pulling up this localhost 4242 on my machine. And let me move you guys to the side. Right away, I'm going to go ahead and close the help. And this just maximizes your screen space a little bit more. So right now, we only have a single workflow available. Faith Ann mentioned in the presentation that we are building the standard workflow. We hope that is ready the end of June, beginning of July, if things go on track. So I'm going to go ahead and start in the guided workflow. We are going to start with surface and mortality. This is, I'm going to mimic the process that at least we have used in the Northern Rockies and the Great Basin, which are the two RX300s I help with. So the reason I'm starting with surface and mortality is to link to that mortality objective in the silvicultural prescription. So that specifically stated, it was very general. If you guys didn't read it, it was the underlined portion in the PowerPoint, but it said, we want to limit mortality in the overstory mortality to less than 20%. And if I were going to pick on the silviculturist a little bit more, I would love to see a DBH threshold. May just minimize some conversations later on if you exceed that mortality a little bit. All right, so just to refresh your guys' memories, this blue outputs is my active working area. So the outputs will show up first. The reason why we have it work this way in Behave is you select your outputs and then different inputs are going to show up on the inputs tab. And that way you don't have to enter a bunch of unnecessary inputs because no one really likes that. So I'm going to go ahead and just select heading for this run. And I do want rate of spread and flame length. Now, there's a couple options to go on. I would suggest probably using the next button just so you don't miss anything on the screen. There's not a lot of outputs on these two particular modules. You can also use the tabs. Okay, so a little clarification. We're still in outputs. If you select mid-flame wind speed as an output, this means you're automatically going to be asked to use 20-foot wind speed as an input because it really doesn't make sense to use mid-flame wind speed as an input and also output your mid-flame wind speed because that is the same number. So from a burn plan perspective, what this would mean is if you are using 20-foot wind speed as you're building your burn plan, but you would also like to show what that equates to for the mid-flame wind speed, Behave is just doing that math for you between the 20-foot wind speed using the wind adjustment factor that you selected. So that's what that means for an output. I am not going to select that today. Okay, so there are two fuel models in this particular unit, and I'm just basing this on what was in the original burn plan. So a lot of the unit was fuel model 188, which is a long needle litter. And then the rest of the unit that had some of that slash, they characterized as a 201. So that's the lightest loading in that slash blowdown fuel model. I'm going to go ahead and run 188. The fire behavior is actually very similar between 188 and 201. So in order to get through all of these runs, I have to make some decisions. And so that was the decision I made. So when I open my fuel model, I'm going to go ahead and select timber litter, which is going to just massively reduce the scrolling. I will select TL8 188. If you're only selecting a single fuel model, you don't necessarily need to click this view. But if you're selecting multiple fuel models, that might be a good idea just to make sure that you selected what you were wanting to select. Okay, fuel moisture. So at this point, I want to put in a really broad range of fuel moistures because I'm thinking about just what is that window that is going to meet this mortality objective? And is this giving me like a nice broad window to work with as I move into, say, developing the prescription? Or do I have issues right away with the objectives? And I may need to have some conversations with specialists, perhaps. So I'm going to use 5 to 15, but I'm going to do it backwards. Okay, so I clicked the range selector. This will just, you can always enter them into the box, but I'm going to make Behave do the work for me. So in order just to make it easy to interpret the outputs, I'm going to put 15 first, and then 5, and I'm going to do it in steps of -2. It'll show you the result over here. You do have to say insert range for it to populate. And then I'm just going to use a single value for my 10 and 100. So I'll use 8, which is kind of close to the middle of the road there for 1 hour, and 9 for my 100. So you can use either mid-flame or 20-foot with surface mortality. Just to keep things consistent as we move into surface crown, I'm going to use 20-foot wind. And I want to use a really broad range here because this is my double check on having a nice broad window of fire behavior to meet this objective. And I'm going to do 5 to 25 miles per hour in steps of 5. And a 25 mile per hour, 20-foot wind in this stand is it's a pretty decent mid-flame wind speed. That'd be about like 7-8 miles per hour. Okay, so now wind adjustment factor. I'm going to put in 0.3. I'll bring in the help for just a second. We did update the table for the wind adjustment factor. So it's still broken down by fuel model over here. And then you have the same general headings of the unsheltered, partially sheltered, fully sheltered. What we did was we kind of cleaned up some of these descriptions so they make more sense. I'm going to go with wind and slope are aligned, and my slope is about 35%. That is about the average throughout that unit. This unit is just under 80 acres in size. Do the select more. I'm going to select Northern Rockies. This unit is just outside Missoula. And what this is going to do is just give me a lot shorter list. The two overstory tree species we have on this unit are ponderosa pine and Douglas fir. I'm going to use Douglas fir in this example just because it's not quite as tolerant of fire as ponderosa pine is. Canopy height is it's about 50. I lost my inputs. Crown ratio. I'm going to put in 0.8. So where that number came from, if the height of my dominant codominant trees are about 50 feet, this unit, not only was it slashed, but those overstory trees were pruned up to 6 feet. So I just took that ratio between 6 feet and 50 feet to give me the 0.8. And we have a picture here that will kind of help you figure out what that looks like. Okay, DBH. Yet again, no DBH minimum associated with those dominant codominant trees. So I'm going to use 10 inches. The trees in this particular unit are not super old. Air temp, I'm going to go on the high end of what I would expect, just to make sure that I'm not going to have too much mortality with that highest air temperature. 80 is pretty darn high for burning in the Missoula area. Go ahead and run. And right away, you're going to have this page show up that's the result settings before you get to the actual results. So the options on this page, you can convert to map units. That is particularly handy in some of our classes like S490. I'm not going to do that today. But here is where you can find the table shading. So this was an option that was somewhat hidden in Behave version 6. So I am going to select the probability of mortality. And it's actually showing me the values right here. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do this, but we're actually not going to have any table shading, and you'll see why in just a second. So in this case, I am interested in the outputs that are going to put me in that probability of mortality range less than 20% mortality. So this will match up with the rate of spread and flame length. My inputs will show up first, but if you click the outputs table at the top, then it's going to take you right down to the outputs. So here's just a little bit of documentation. It's going to tell you the type, the equation type for the mortality that it's using. And then here is our rate of spread. So ranging from about 2 to 13 chains per hour. And our flame length is 2 feet to 5 feet. So this is my gut check on making sure that I have a wide window in order to meet just this one objective is what we're looking at. So burning under a very broad range of conditions, anywhere from 5 to 15% for that 1 hour and 5 to 25 miles per hour for that 20-foot wind gives me this flame length range. And so that is a super broad window, and we have no mortality issues based on these inputs. Our probability of mortality is predicted to be 12%, and the scorch height ranges from about 3 up to about 7 feet. And just to move things along, I am going to not spend time looking at the output graphs. So one trick to get you home, you can either click the structure or you can just click the logo and that will take you home. We are going to do a surface run next, and I'm going to do this fairly quickly just to show you a couple things. Okay, so here are my 4 tabs for my outputs in Surface. So you'll notice the fire behavior looks very similar to surface mortality. You have size, and this is really what I want to show you here in just the surface module. We have 2 spotting models available in Surface, burning pile and wind-driven surface fire. And these are the only 2 spotting models you can find in Surface. And I'll show you why in just a minute. So you'll see both of them are available right now. So the wind-driven surface fire is specific to grasslands. And so if you select the wind-driven surface fire as your spotting model, you are going to get a limited number of fuel models available to you. So we have gone through the list and pared it down just so the models used as appropriately. If I select fire behavior, you'll notice burning pile goes away. So there's no fire behavior as we think about like a spreading fire associated with burning pile. If you think about it, like how would you even select a fuel model for your pile, right? So if you are looking at spotting from burning piles, that is very specific to the burning pile. And if you're burning your piles and then doing a broadcaster underburn, you're definitely looking at a couple of runs to do that. We are going to dive into surface and crown because we'll use many of the same inputs as we would have in surface. I just wanted to show you the 2 spotting models that were specific to surface fire. So now we'll jump into surface and crown because this is where spotting from torching trees lives. Okay, I'm going to ignore everything on the wind and fuel tab. I'm going to go to fire behavior. So I am interested in rate of spread and flame length. Those are the 2 things we care about most. Under fire type. So first you'll see the transition to crown fire. These are 3 outputs that are associated with that transition to crown fire. So these may be super helpful if you, maybe before you're even prepping a unit, if one of your objectives is to, limit the potential for some type of crown fire in your unit, running through a surface crown run may be pretty darn handy. So we're going to go ahead and click the transition ratio and the critical surface flame length so you guys can see those outputs and how things work together. And then under active crown fire, I'm going to go ahead and select active ratio and critical crown rate of spread. So if any of you have some mixed severity units where you're trying to blow some holes, I would certainly suggest running surface crown so you can start to look at those crown fire thresholds. Okay, I'm not interested in size right now, but I am interested in spotting. I'm going to go ahead and select both. And I'm going to, I've turned the corner, I'm on the inputs now. I'm going to keep using 188. Now, just for funsies, I'm going to use the same 1 hour fuel range that I did in the surface mortality run. I'm going to set it up the same. I'm going to go 15 to 5 by -2. Eight and 9. I'm going to use 80 for my live woody fuel moisture. 60 is fully cured. And we did update this table. So this is giving some guidance based on numbers that would be appropriate to use for live herbaceous and live woody in model land. So a lot of times when we're modeling, we run things a little bit lower for those live fuel moistures than we do, say, if you have some sample data from your unit or a nearby unit. Go ahead and say next. I have to use a 20-foot wind speed in surface crown. So you'll see mid-flame wind speed is grayed out. It is not available. And I'm going to go ahead and run that same range, just so we can take a look at these outputs. There's a little bit more to interpret by doing this broad range. I'll use the same wind adjustment factor that we used before of 0.3, and my wind and slope are aligned. And in this case, I'm using my average slope. All of these assumptions that you make along the way, this is where it could be super handy to actually put in a note. Like I could say, I am using the average slope for this unit. I'm going to use the Finney crown fire method. There is a little bit of information in the help on the differences between these two crown fire methods. Foliar moisture. Analysts, for the most part, like in the fire season, in the wildfire season, the golden rule is to use 100. Now, from a prescribed fire perspective, it's okay if you maybe want to bump that a little bit higher if for a spring burn or an early growing season burn. You could go up to even like 150% would be okay. If you're okay burning spring or fall, I would probably suggest using 100 here, which would make a little bit more sense to cover either or both of those seasons. See if I can, there, the notes went away. Okay, canopy height. So canopy height's pretty straightforward. You guys can go out to your unit and kind of guesstimate that by eyeballing. Canopy base height is also not too bad, assuming you have access to your unit. Do have some information over here on canopy base height. So here's a great picture. You can see on the uphill side of this 2-track road, all baby trees have been killed. And so the canopy base height is much higher on the left side of this 2-track than the downhill side of this 2-track. So the canopy base height is that distance between the ground and, essentially these live limbs. And it can include, so it includes ladder fuels, and that's an important difference between the silviculture world and the fire world. When we're thinking about canopy base height, we definitely want to include our ladder fuels in there. So tall shrubs, conifer region, anything like that is something you should keep in mind with canopy base height. And while I have the help open, I do want to direct you guys to this pub is one source of information. What they did was for 5 different forest types, they started with the initial stand, and then they reduced the basal area by 75%, 50%, 25%. They did destructive sampling. So they weighed all of that material, and it can be some guidance for what to use, specifically more in the canopy bulk density input. Base height is something that you can kind of get away with just going out and eyeballing. So in this case, I'm going to use 6 feet for my canopy base height, and I'm using that just because that was the height that those overstory trees were pruned up to. Okay, canopy bulk density. I talked about the pub. Other sources for canopy bulk density would be land fire data. So that's what you're going to see if you're running the Get Landscape tool in FlamApp or IFTDIS or WFDIS. if you do have a silviculturist on your unit, you can have a good talk with them about some inputs for canopy bulk density. If they're running the forest vegetation simulator, then they can get those values and they can kind of help you with what makes sense as an input for canopy bulk density. So in this case, I'm going to choose closed, my downwind canopy cover. That's on private land. It has not been thinned, so it's the trees are a little bit thicker than they are inside the unit. My downwind canopy height is pretty similar to within the unit. So I'm going to go ahead and use 50. Because these trees are fairly widely spaced, I'm probably going to go with a low number for my number of torching trees. So this could be either, that single or group tree torching. In this case, with these somewhat widely spaced trees, I might go like 2 or 3. It kind of just depends on how things are distributed within your unit. DBH. So this would be for your torching tree species of interest. So maybe 12 might make sense for that codom dominant tree. I'll go ahead and select Douglas fir because that just is more likely to spot than ponderosa pine. Okay, and my torching tree height is 50. So you'll notice we did already enter a canopy height here, but your spotting tree species may be different. It may be a different height than, like say if you have some shorter subalpine fir, fun to burn in compared to the rest of your stand. My ridge to valley elevation difference, I used 300 feet. This is adjacent to the valley floor. And I went with mid-slope windward for my spotting source location. For spotting, you're thinking about, okay, based on either the wind direction that you really want to have, that optimal wind direction during your burn, or the dominant direction, you're thinking about that where those spots are most likely going to land. So that's kind of helping you figure out this elevation difference and your spotting source location. And I'm going to put about 3/4 of a mile for my horizontal distance. Okay, we made it through our 1,000 or so inputs. And I'm not going to select anything on this page. Let's jump right to our outputs. Okay, so we actually did not select fire type. This is an automatic output that is going to be given to you when you're using Surface Crown. And that is just because you can't really interpret the rest of the outputs if you don't have this information. So this is somewhat helpful in helping build a prescription because what I'm seeing here is in this very minimum 1 hour fuel moisture and this highest wind speed, there is more potential for torching to occur. Okay, so this might help me maybe depending on the proximity to private land, critical values at risk. Maybe I want to start limiting this wind speed and throw out this maximum of 25 miles per hour. Now, just remember it's this corner here where we have torching because I want you to remember that for the flame length. Our rate of spread, 2 to 13 chains per hour. Okay, so flame lengths, about 2 feet up to about 4 feet here if we ignore this corner. But if you look in this corner where torching is predicted, our flame lengths go up quite a bit. So with torching, you could have flame lengths of about 46 to 56 feet. So in all of these outputs here that are surface, that's where you're finding those much lower flame lengths. And then where torching is predicted, much higher flame lengths. Okay, we are working on changing these tables so that they flow a little bit more logically. Let me jump down to the critical surface flame length. Okay, so in this case, our critical surface flame length is 4 feet. So what that is telling you is your surface fire has to be greater than 4 feet to have some type of crown fire, either torching or active crown fire. The stand really can't support active crown fire. The trees are too widely spaced. So this may be helpful if you're thinking about how to prep a unit of what to shoot for. And this is very much linked to your canopy base height. So you can actually run a range of canopy base height and your critical surface flame length values are going to change, but you're just crossing that threshold. Crown fire is all about crossing thresholds. We don't have active crown fire in this particular unit, but in order to have active crown fire, my critical crown rate of spread is 89 chains per hour. So if we pop back up to the rate of spread, you can see we are nowhere near that. All right. And here is our spotting distance from torching trees. This is a current bug. As you'll see, it is zeros across the board. The tenths need to be shown for sure for maximum spotting distance. So this is something our developers are working on fixing, and we will push that in a future version release. One thing to keep in mind, because some of you may have units where you know for sure that there is no way you're going to have active crown fire, but you still want the spotting distance from torching trees in case you did get some torching. You can go into surface crown and you can run spot by itself. So if you don't want to worry about all of those inputs that are associated with crown, you just go to the spot tab on your outputs, select torching trees, and then you are going to have far fewer inputs to deal with. So you can still get this, this output to put in your burn plans just by running it alone. Okay, let's head to our last module. Surface and contain. You'll notice right away, heading, backing, flanking went away. Direction of interest went away. Many of you probably remember how confusing the directions tab was in version 6. And so we wanted to make this far easier. And I kind of skipped over this in the surface run. But your options for direction are either heading or heading, backing, flanking. And maybe you don't care about flanking and you only want heading, backing. Well, sorry, we're going to give you all 3. So you can choose what you want. That was just the easiest way to include this in the interface so that it was very intuitive to users. So when you're running surface contained, it is for a heading fire only, and that's why that is the only option available. I'll go ahead and select rate of spread and flame length. I don't want that. And under fire, I'm just going to select all of these outputs. So a lot of times when you don't know what you want, selecting everything can help you figure out what makes the most sense to use in the future. Okay, so I'm really assuming that most of my spots would occur in this similar fuel type on private land. So this 188, I'm still going to use the same fuel model. There is some grass a little further out. That's more closer to the structures. So if I was doing a spring burn, maybe I wouldn't be very concerned about any spots in that grass. But if it was a fall burn, boy, I'd probably be a little bit more concerned. Okay, let's go ahead and I'm going to set this up Like if I was still comfortable with all of those same values, I might set this up for, a lot of times in prescriptions, people are kind of using a low fire intensity and a high fire intensity. I'm going to set this up for the high fire intensity option. So I'm going to choose what I would assume to be my minimum 1 hour fuel moisture if I've gone through everything else. And this is kind of what I'm rolling with for that element 7, if you guys are fed folks, but your prescription table. So I'm going to use 5, and then I used 8 and 9 for my 10 and 100. I'll go ahead and use 20-foot wind just to keep things consistent. And maybe I've already decided to drop that 25 miles per hour. And I'll use about 20 miles per hour. Okay, we've already gone through most of these inputs, so I'm using exactly the same. All right, now I'm going to show you guys a little bit of a trick with contain. And this is to mimic an option that we are building into contain that should be available at the same time that I think it might be available. Now I'm thinking back. It will be available very soon. I think it will be rolled in with kind of the major release coming where we release the standard workflow. Okay, I'm going to choose the rear, which is generally what we do. And for my line construction offset, this is kind of a tricky one. I'm going to put in 0. 0 means a direct attack. This is another thing I don't quite love about how contain works. So we'll have to look at the outputs so that we can make a little bit more sense of this line construction offset. Okay, elapsed time. I realized that we are missing a figure from the help. Some of these inputs in contain can be a little confusing. So this figure that will be in the help shortly kind of helps you figure out what these different variables mean. So you burn in your unit, you have a spot outside your unit. So that is the ignite part. That spot starts spreading. And then the elapsed time is the time between when the fire starts spreading and the fire is reported. So essentially, hoping you have a lot of holders on your unit, you're kind of estimating how long it would take those holders to realize there's a spot outside of the unit. And then your resource arrival time, which to me looks like a spaceship when your resource arrives. So that would be pretty awesome if we had that ability. Okay. So this is a pretty small unit. It's adjacent to private land. I'm going to assume that there are going to be a lot of holders. So I'm going to put 10 minutes. So one weird thing, because this is you will do this because I had to train myself. You can change your units on the fly over here. You are going to want to click the arrow and you're going to wonder why Behave is not functioning. You can throw something or you can click in the white. And that's where you change your units. So I do not want 600 minutes. I want 10 minutes. Ooh, are you going to give it to me? Okay. All right, so I'm going to name this minimum I. Resource arrival time. This is a Forest Service unit, so our resources contingency have to be on site. So things to think about on what you put in for your resource arrival time. Where are your contingency resources? What does the access look like? Are folks having to hike? Is there good road access? And then, just all of those logistics. Just to make things simple, I'm going to put in 0. But what I want to do here is I want to do a range for my line production. So I'm going to do 10 to 50 chains per hour, steps of 10. And then let's work those folks 3 hours and see how they do. So I'm just using a single resource here. Okay, let's go ahead and run it. Contain takes a minute. Okay. So by running contain with this wide range of line production rates, what I'm looking for over here under the contain status is where does it go from withdrawn to contained? So in this case, in these fuels, it's not a super fast spreading fire. It's somewhere between 20 and 30 chains per hour is the golden area. And so by running contain this way, I'm actually figuring out what is that minimum line production rate that I need in order to catch that spot. Rather than running contain 80 times with a different complement of resources and banging your head against the wall a little bit. So this will help you figure out what exactly you need for your production rate. So now if we go right back into here, go to suppression. Let's just swap that out. Let's go 10 to 20 by 1. Insert that range and run it again. I think contain probably takes the longest to run of any of the modules. Now we hope that it works on a live demo. And go to our output tables. Oh, did I choose the wrong range? Was it between 20 and 30? Shoot. First time in my life I've made a mistake. Of course, it takes longer this time. I'll wait. I do have a run if we have to use it. I have a backup. There we go. Okay. Go to our tables. Okay. So first, if I come to the contain status, 22 chains per hour. That is what I'm shooting for. So now that I know that information, I can figure out that complement of resources that's going to get me to 22 chains per hour. It was 5 acres when they contained it. They were able to contain it within 2 hours. They built 43 chains of line. And one other thing I wanted to point out is that line construction offset. So what you have to think about on whether you do or don't need that line construction offset is the flame length. So thinking about the hauling chart, the types of resources that you will be using. Are you thinking hand crews only? Do you have heavy equipment access? You might be using some engines or some tractor plows. In this case, if I assume there's no road access to the north on that private land, so I'm using hand crews, 4.3 chain or 4.3 foot flame length is you kind of right on that line there of whether your hand crews can go direct. So this is an instance where I would suggest using a pretty low offset of maybe a chain or two. So what that means is they're not building indirect line, they're building parallel line. So they're just moving back, a couple chains from that spreading fire to give themselves a little breathing room, not get scorched. And so I would probably use a pretty low offset for this particular unit, maybe like, 1 or 2 chains. If this is more like 6 feet, maybe I would use 3 or 4. It is definitely an estimate. There's no like guidance exactly for this. I have no idea what questions we have, but I'll show you guys real quick how to open a file. I just realized now I failed to save anything. Sorry about that. The save button is here. So what I can do is let's find a file. And oh shoot, it took me to IQCS land. If anyone wants to do IQCS for me, I'll give that up in a heartbeat. So I have this kind of set up where maybe it's going to mimic your project. So remember, you can save Behave7 files anywhere. So if I think about this webinar as being my project, go ahead and Behave7. So we are in this folder. So maybe that's my project folder. Here are my Behave7 runs. So this is what I prepped just in case I have had issues with a live demo. And let's go ahead and load Surface since I failed to show you guys heading, flanking, backing. And it's going to load everything. And one great thing compared to version 6 is I can go to the results and it saves my results for me. Oh, this may be the reason I didn't show you guys heading, flanking, and backing. We are going to reconfigure this. So this is very difficult to interpret. What it's doing right now is you have a table for heading and a table for flanking and a table for backing. So what we want this to look like is you will have one table for your heading rate of spread, one table for your heading flame length, and it's going to make this interpretation a lot easier because you can have your 1 hour fuel moisture down here and your wind speed across the top. So it will just make a little bit more sense when you're interpreting the outputs. If I want to save that, I can go right here. And this is going to it's going to red cards. Why not? Put it in my red card folder so I can be confused later. And I can say, this is a surface run from a demo. Save it. If I click the print button, this is what's going to generate a PDF. So we're trying to make the documentation easier for you guys. So you can save this, use it as an appendix in your burn plan, or you can print it from this PDF. And I know we're a little bit over. Sorry about that. Kind of felt like I turned the fire hose on you guys.
Looking at the questions, I think all of them were answered in the Q&A box. So if you have any questions about that, you can look there. One of them that I do want to access just briefly is, when do you have to switch to Behave7? And I will say that is not our call. Lowen and I talked about it, and we'll be talking once we know more bugs are out of the system. We'll be working with NWCG to come up with a timeline, and it is their decision really on when things switch. But best guess for me, the earliest would be a year. I can't see it happening any faster than that. So you can use Behave6 right now. Behave7, if you feel comfortable with it, is fine too. We're presenting it now largely to introduce it to people so they can get used to using it. But we're not demanding that you start using Behave7 now. And as for postcards, we're requesting them now. We're not requiring them. But anytime you come visit us at the Fire Lab, if you've sent us a postcard, you will be able to see it because we have them all filed and organized so that you can come visit your postcard if you'd like. And that's all I had.
Yeah, thanks for the question on when you have to use version 7. I'm hoping that there can be some sort of unified agency guidance on that. I am sensitive to the fact that it's a CYA thing for burn bosses. I certainly don't want anyone to ever be questioned on why they used version 6 in their burn plan rather than version 7. So hopefully there will be official guidance from your particular agency on when that change is to occur.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Faith Ann and Luwen. And thank you so much, everybody who attended today. If you have any last questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A. Were there any last questions, Faith Ann, or one that you wanted to go through and answer live? I know, Faith Ann, you sort of answered a couple of them.
So we got a lot of really good recommendations, and a lot of those some of those we noticed, some we didn't. So I've written them all down. So we'll work with the developer to get those enacted. In terms of changing all the settings from English to metric, I don't think it's in the release that's coming up. I think it's in the one after that. We're planning like 4 or 5 releases down the road, so I can't remember exactly which one it's in, but I'm pretty sure it's in one of the next 2. We heard in the Q&A that the Fish and Wildlife Service was able to use Behave7 yesterday. If you want to run the modules in a different configuration than what we showed you today, the standard workflow will allow you to do that. All that the guided workflow we're trying to is more of for teaching and getting used to the software and what it does. Once you get into the standard workflow, you're more experienced, you know what's going on, you get to pick the modules you want to pick in there. And custom fuel models are coming soon. We weren't able to get everything in that we wanted in this first build. That is on a high priority for the list for those who use those. Creating tables for 3 variables. Someone asked about that. We will look at that again and see if we can do anything right now. It became too onerous for us to work on, but there may be solutions in the future that we'll look into for that. And that is all that I wrote down. Everything else was pretty simple. And also we will be developing courses on the Wildland Learning Fire Learning portal. So if you had any questions about how Behave operates or which buttons you click or when, those will be developed in the very near future. So look for those as well, and we'll send announcements out through all our regular channels. Okay, and that is it.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.